Welcome to Private Stories, where people discover who they really are. She walked into the house carrying a small paper bag with leftovers and a story she had clearly rehearsed in her head. I know that because she stepped inside smiling to herself, still glowing from the evening she had just spent with him. Daniel Carter, her boss, the man whose name she always said meant nothing. She did not notice the silence at first. She did not notice the missing shoes beside the door. She did not notice the pale outlines on the wall where our photographs used to hang. She kicked off her heels and laughed lightly. Then she called out through the hallway, "Vince, you awake?" Her voice floated through the empty house and faded against the walls. No answer. The bedroom lights were dark. The kitchen felt hollow. And the suitcase that had always lived under our bed was gone. When she opened the closet, one lonely hanger was still swinging slightly, as if it had not yet realized I was serious about leaving. I often imagined the exact second she understood what she was seeing. The moment when small details began connecting into one terrifying truth. My laptop no longer on the desk. My slippers missing from beneath the armchair. My jackets gone from the hallway rack. I had not just stepped out. I had erased myself. What remained was the shell of a life we once built together. A house filled with gaps she could not explain away. I wonder if she noticed the wedding ring. I left it resting on top of her favorite candle. Vanilla bergamot. The one she always lit when she wanted the house to feel romantic. I pressed the ring gently into the warm wax earlier that evening while the candle was still burning. While she was across the city sitting in a dim restaurant with Daniel. Probably leaning across a small candlelit table. Probably smiling that soft smile she used to save for me. Maybe ordering her second glass of wine. Maybe laughing at some clever story he tells every woman he wants to impress. And while she was doing that, I was quietly packing the past into cardboard boxes. I moved through the house slowly and methodically, like a man sneaking out of his own life. There were no tears. No dramatic shouting. No broken plates or slammed doors. Just silence, careful movements, a strange surgical calm. Because this dinner was not the first. It was simply the first one she stopped hiding. That night she wore the red silk blouse I once told her made her look unforgettable. The same one she wore last Christmas when we hosted dinner for friends. She curled her blonde hair the same way she used to on our anniversaries. Soft waves falling over her shoulders. And when she stepped into that black sedan waiting 2 streets away from the house. Yes, I saw it. The one that always parked just far enough so the neighbors would not gossip. I stood at the window and watched. But I did not wave goodbye. I already knew what she would say later. He is just my boss. It was only a business dinner. You always overthink everything, Vince. She had a gift for bending the truth until it looked harmless. A talent for wrapping betrayal in politeness. But even the most elegant lies begin to thin when you hold them up to the light. And I had been living in darkness long enough. So while she ordered creme brulee, I was deleting our shared bank accounts. While she laughed across the table at Daniel, I removed my name from the apartment lease. While she leaned forward smiling at a man who was not her husband, I walked out the back door carrying the last box of what little dignity I had left. No note. No explanation. Nothing she could chase. She was not even supposed to return home that early. I expected to have until midnight. But she walked in shortly after 10:30. Which means the dinner probably ended sooner than planned. Maybe Daniel had somewhere else to go. Maybe she suddenly remembered she was married. Maybe she even said no to dessert. But by the time she stepped into that quiet house, it was already too late. The place was no longer our home. And the man she left behind was already gone. She probably imagined I had stormed out in anger. Maybe she pictured me shouting something dramatic, slamming the door, driving off into the night like a wounded animal. But the truth was far colder. I was calm, completely calm. And that was the part that would haunt her later. Because calm means time. And time means planning. I had been planning this since the Monday morning she forgot to close her purse. It hung open on the kitchen chair while steam filled the bathroom upstairs where she was showering. I was not snooping, not at first, but the receipt stuck out from her purse like a white flag begging to be seen. Dinner for two, appetizers, a bottle of wine, 2 entrees, a harbor restaurant in Santa Monica we had never visited together. Expensive, private, romantic. The timestamp, 9:48 Thursday night. That same evening she told me she was attending a networking seminar with her marketing team. But marketing seminars do not order grilled salmon with truffle potatoes. And they certainly do not share creme brulee for two. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table holding that receipt, staring at it as if the ink might rearrange itself, as if the numbers might apologize. But the paper remained silent. Proof does not care about feelings. My hands trembled, yet I did not cry. What filled me instead was something heavier. Stillness. When Lillian came downstairs 20 minutes later with a towel wrapped around her golden hair, she looked relaxed and effortless, like nothing in the world had cracked open. I held the receipt inside my palm. For a moment I thought about confronting her, demanding an explanation, watching her scramble for excuses, client bonding, team dinner, a spontaneous celebration. But I did none of those things. Instead, I folded the receipt once, slid it into my pocket, and smiled. That smile frightened me more than anything else, because it felt completely empty. The next morning she kissed my cheek before leaving for work. A quick, gentle kiss, the kind people give out of habit rather than affection. She wore her charcoal gray dress, the one she jokingly called her meeting armor. Her blonde hair was tied into a loose knot, and a few strands framed her face in that perfectly careless way she always mastered. I watched her move around the kitchen, pouring coffee, scrolling through her phone, replying to messages with small distracted smiles, as if our life together was completely normal, as if nothing had already begun collapsing. I asked a simple question: "Will you be home late tonight?" She shrugged lightly while slipping on her coat. "Probably not. But eat without me just in case." Just in case. Those 3 words echoed in my head long after the front door closed behind her. She did not look back when she walked to her car. Not once. That moment felt strangely familiar, like watching a rerun of a show where you already know the ending. Because I did. The second her car disappeared down the street, I opened the hallway closet. Inside were the flattened moving boxes we once saved after moving into that house. Back when we still believed in forever. I pulled them out one by one, folded them open, and began packing our life. I did not start with furniture or large things. Those were easy. I started with the small sentimental items, the dangerous ones, the birthday cards she once filled with glittering hearts and promises, the ceramic mug she painted during one of our early dates.
Vince plus Lily forever.
She had written it in crooked blue letters while laughing at how terrible she was at pottery. I wrapped it carefully in newspaper. My chest tightened, but I kept moving. There was also the concert ticket from the awful indie band she dragged me to on our 3rd date. The music had been terrible, but she danced the entire night anyway, her blonde hair glowing under the stage lights while she pulled my hands into the crowd. Back then she looked at me like I was the only person in the world. Each memory felt like a brick settling deeper inside my stomach. Still, I packed everything. The holiday ornaments, the framed photos, the woven blanket we bought during a summer trip to Asheville. That trip almost ended our relationship. We argued for hours about nothing, but somehow we stayed together. We always stayed together. At least I thought we would. By 2 in the afternoon, the house already felt different. Not only emptier, lighter, as if the walls themselves were shedding an old skin. Then, at exactly 3:17, my phone buzzed. A notification from our bank. Our joint credit card had been used again. Lunch downtown. 1 steak, sparkling water, and something listed as companion meal. Companion. The word felt strange. Cold. Almost mocking. She was not even trying to hide it anymore. I stood quietly in the doorway of our bedroom, watching the afternoon sunlight stretch slowly across the carpet. The house felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to make the final decision. And finally, I did. I picked up my phone and called my cousin Marcus. He lived about 2 hours north in a small town outside Sacramento. He owned a modest auto repair shop. Nothing glamorous, but honest. Years earlier, he once told me something I never forgot. If life ever knocks you down hard, just come north and reset. No questions asked. When he answered, I only said a few words. Hey Marcus, you still got that spare room? There was a short pause on the line. Then he replied calmly, always, come whenever you need. Before hanging up, I heard his wife whisper quietly in the background. Is it about her? Marcus answered with a quiet sigh. Yeah. I did not know which part hurt more. The fact that they already knew, or the fact that they were not surprised. I finished packing before sunset, vacuumed the floors, took out the trash, cleaned the bathroom mirror. I did not want her to think I had left in chaos. I wanted her to feel the quiet, to see the clean, empty space where I once existed, like a ghost that finally moved on. After everything was packed, I sat in the driveway inside my car, watching the sky slowly darken. I was not waiting for her. I was waiting for the moment when it would finally feel real. The moment when my heart would admit what my mind had understood for weeks. She did not love me anymore. Then in the distance, I saw headlights approaching down the street. Her headlights. For a second, I thought about starting the engine and leaving immediately. But I did not. I wanted her to walk into the house first, to feel the silence, to experience what it feels like when someone's presence suddenly becomes an empty space. The front door opened just after 10 that night. I had parked 3 blocks away and walked back quietly so I could watch. Maybe it sounds pathetic, but I needed to see her face. She stepped inside laughing softly, still holding that paper takeout bag, still glowing from whatever story Daniel had told over dinner. For a moment, she did not turn on the lights. She probably expected to find me reading in the living room, or half asleep on the couch like I often was when waiting for her. 5 seconds passed. Then she called my name. Vince. Casual. Almost playful. Like I was just in the bathroom. When she said it again the second time, her voice cracked slightly. That was when the first light flicked on. Then another. She moved quickly through the house, room to room, her voice echoing against empty walls. I could almost feel the panic rising inside her. Then she opened the bedroom closet, and the truth finally reached her. Half the clothes gone.
Bare håndgish.
My side of the shelf empty. My toothbrush no longer beside hers. That was when the phone calls started. My screen lit up again and again. 16 calls in less than an hour. I watched every one of them, but I did not answer. I did not block her either. I wanted her to sit inside that silence, to feel it grow heavier with every unanswered ring. At 11:02, she left the first voicemail. Her voice was shaking, but she was still trying to sound composed. Vince, hey, where are you? Are you okay? This is not funny. Just call me back. Not I am sorry. Not please come home. Just a command wrapped in panic. By midnight, the tone had changed. The second voicemail was messy. If this is some kind of punishment, this is not how adults handle things. We need to talk. You cannot just disappear. But that was the one thing she did not understand. I had not disappeared. For the first time in years, I had finally appeared again. That night in Marcus's guest room, sleep never came. I lay on the narrow bed staring at the ceiling fan as it rotated slowly through the darkness, each turn slicing the silence into smaller pieces. Memories kept replaying in my mind like scenes from a film that refused to end. The anniversary necklace I once bought Lillian. One photograph of Lillian and Daniel sitting far too close together at a rooftop bar downtown. The timestamp showed it was taken during one of her so-called strategy workshops. The second file contained an email chain between Lillian and her assistant. They were discussing how to cover for her absence on a Friday evening. The third file was a scanned restaurant receipt. The same one I found in her purse. Dinner for two. The final file was a blank document. Only 2 words were written at the top. You knew.
No explanation. No accusations.
Just enough truth to shatter denial. By noon my phone contained 6 new voicemails. The last one almost sounded like a scream. Vince, you are blowing this completely out of proportion. Why are you doing this? Why did you not just talk to me? I never wanted to hurt you. That sentence hit me harder than anything else she said. Not because she was crying, but because even now she still positioned herself as the victim. I had begged for her attention for months, tried to be patient, tried to be enough. But now the truth finally had something stronger than words. It had timestamps, locations, evidence, and the story no longer belonged to her. Soon the people who trusted Daniel Carter would begin asking questions about the kind of mentorship he was offering at the firm. Because when a life is built on deception, sometimes all it takes is one whisper of truth to make everything collapse. By the end of that week, the silence had changed. At first it felt heavy, like pressure in the air before a storm, but slowly it transformed into something else, something almost peaceful. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes, stopped expecting apologies or explanations that would magically repair everything. The wedding ring stayed buried at the bottom of my travel bag. I did not look at it anymore. For the first time in months, my mind felt quiet. Then Friday arrived, and she found me. I was in Marcus's garage sanding down an old maple chair a customer had dropped off earlier that week. The legs wobbled badly. Marcus joked that the chair reminded him of my marriage. The irony was not lost on me. Wood dust covered my hands. The electric sander hummed steadily in my grip, and for a moment life felt simple. Then I heard footsteps crunching on the gravel outside. Light, careful. Not Marcus, not his wife. I already knew who it was before I looked up. Lillian. She stood at the entrance of the garage wearing the navy coat I bought her last Christmas. The one she once said made her feel too mature. Her blonde hair was tied loosely behind her head, in that deliberately messy way she used when she wanted to look effortless. But that was not what froze me in place. It was the bruise beneath her left eye. Faint but unmistakable. Purple. Swollen. Real. She did not say hello. She did not ask how I was. She simply spoke. Can we talk? I kept sanding the chair for several seconds before turning off the machine. The sudden silence inside the garage felt sharp. I looked directly at her. You have 5 minutes. She swallowed, then stepped closer. Her voice sounded fragile. I do not know what you think you know, but this is not what you think. A laugh escaped my mouth. Not because it was funny, because it was pathetic. That is how you start this conversation. After everything. She flinched. I made a mistake, she whispered. I raised one eyebrow. Just one. She reached slowly into the pocket of her coat and pulled out her phone. I need to show you something. She opened the gallery and began scrolling. The first photos were exactly what I expected. Her and Daniel sitting close together at restaurants. Daniel leaning toward her, brushing a strand of her blonde hair behind her ear. Lillian smiling the way she used to smile at me. My chest tightened, but I said nothing. Then she stopped scrolling. The next image was different. It showed her living room, the furniture overturned, a broken lamp on the floor, a shattered wine glass. I looked at her. What is this? She hesitated. Last night I told him I was done, that I was going to find you, that I needed to fix things. Her voice trembled slightly. He did not take it well. For a moment my mind struggled to process what she was saying. Was this real? Or another carefully rehearsed performance? She continued speaking. I told him I could not keep doing this, that you were the only person who ever truly saw me. Her eyes filled with emotion. He grabbed my phone. He pushed me. It was never like that before, Vince. But last night something changed. I stepped back slowly. my hands instinctively tightening into fists. Not because of her. Because of the image of that man touching her. Whatever she had done. No one deserved that. Why tell me now, I asked. She looked straight into my eyes. Because I have nowhere else to go. And because you are the only person who might believe I never wanted it to go this far. Silence filled the garage. Inside my chest, emotions twisted together. Anger, confusion, a painful fragment of pity, and something else. Something dangerous. A small lingering piece of love. She reached toward my hand. I pulled back immediately. Do not. Not yet. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I thought you deserved to know who he really is. I nodded slowly. I already knew what he was. I just did not know what you were. That sentence seemed to land heavily between us. She did not cry. I will give her that. She stood still, accepting the words like someone who finally understood the debt she owed. Where are you staying? I asked. She shook her head slowly. Nowhere yet. I turned and walked into the house. A moment later I returned holding a spare blanket. I handed it to her without saying anything. You are not staying here. But I will take you to a hotel. After that, you are on your own. She nodded quietly. The drive into town passed in silence. She clutched the blanket tightly in her hands. Like armor. When we reached the motel, I stopped the car. She stepped out without another word. The pale yellow lights of the building reflected in the wet pavement. I watched her walk toward the entrance. And in that moment I realized something deeply unsettling. Part of me still wanted to protect her. But another part wanted to see Daniel Carter fall. Hard. Publicly. Permanently. And I already knew exactly how to make that happen. 3 days passed after I left Lillian at that motel. No calls. No messages. No desperate attempts to see me. The silence surprised me. Part of me expected another wave of explanations. Another long chain of texts trying to justify the unjustifiable. But instead there was nothing. She stayed in that cheap roadside motel on the edge of town. Ordered takeout. Kept the curtains closed. At least that was what Marcus heard from the woman who worked at the front desk. Meanwhile, I was not sitting still. I was moving pieces. Carefully. Quietly. It started with a plain manila envelope. No return address. Only a printed label with one name. Daniel Carter. And beneath it the name of the consulting firm where he had built his spotless reputation. Inside were 36 pages. Photographs. Printed emails. Credit card statements. Calendar screenshots. A timeline built so carefully it could not be dismissed as gossip. The evidence was not vulgar. Nothing scandalous enough to be thrown out as petty revenge. Just facts. Clear. Precise. Impossible to deny. The envelope arrived at the firm Wednesday morning. 10:13 my phone buzzed. A message from someone I barely remembered. Tabitha. A colleague of Lillian from years ago. We once met at a holiday party. Vince, is it true what people are saying in the office? I did not answer. Another message followed quickly. They say Daniel is under review. The board called an emergency meeting today. Something big is happening. I sat at the end of Marcus's driveway holding my phone and a cup of black coffee, watching cars pass slowly on the quiet road. I expected to feel satisfaction, maybe triumph. Instead, there was only a strange emptiness, like watching the final scene of a film I never wanted to star in. Still, I was not finished. That evening, another message arrived. Private number. 5 sharp words. What exactly did you do, Daniel? Even through the screen, I could feel the arrogance in that sentence. He still believed he controlled the situation. Still believed I was just a wounded husband lashing out. But I had not lashed out. I had sharpened my patience. And waited. Instead of replying, I made a phone call. 2 years earlier, I met a journalist at a charity event. Her name was Rachel Dunn. She wrote for a financial ethics publication. Not the kind of outlet that chased scandals, but the kind that quietly investigated corporate behavior. I did not tell her everything. I only pointed her in the right direction, mentioned the right names, suggested the right timeline. People like Daniel always leave trails, and good journalists know how to follow them. By Thursday afternoon, the consequences began spreading. One junior partner at the firm was placed on administrative leave. Internal investigations escalated. Corporate lawyers appeared. The company released a statement about ethical responsibility and leadership values. Daniel Carter was suddenly taking an emergency leave of absence. The polished executive had become radioactive. Clients were distancing themselves. Investors were nervous. His perfect image had cracked. Lillian called twice that day. I did not answer. Marcus's wife Denise eventually asked quietly if I was all right. I told her I was, but the truth was more complicated. That evening I drove back to the motel. Not to comfort Lillian, not to reconcile, just to deliver one final envelope. She opened the door slowly. Her face looked pale and exhausted. No makeup, no carefully styled hair. Just a woman who had spent several nights alone with her choices. "What is this?" she asked softly. I handed her the envelope without stepping inside. "The truth. For when you decide to stop lying to yourself." Inside were copies of everything I had sent to the firm. But one thing was different. Her name had been removed, blacked out. She opened the folder slowly, her hands trembling as she flipped through the pages. "You could have destroyed me too." Her voice sounded hollow. I paused beside the car and looked back at her. "You already did that yourself." She stood there under the pale motel lights, holding the evidence like it was an obituary for the life she once believed she controlled. I drove away, and for the first time since all of this began, I felt something real. Not revenge, not joy, clarity. Months later, I attended an art gallery opening downtown. Marcus's cousin Julian was an artist, a quiet man who painted haunting landscapes and broken people. He insisted I needed fresh air and new scenery. I almost refused, but eventually I went. One of his paintings stopped me in the middle of the gallery. A storm of yellow and dark red colors. Chaotic, violent. Inside the painting, a man slowly faded into the background while a woman in a red dress turned away. I stared at it for nearly 15 minutes. Then I heard her voice behind me. Soft, careful. "I did not expect to see you here." I turned slowly. Lillian stood near the entrance of the gallery, her coat still damp from the rain outside, her posture uncertain. For a moment I thought she might leave, but she stepped closer instead. "You cut your hair?" she said quietly. I said nothing. She tried again. I saw the article. Of course she had. 2 days earlier, Rachel Dunn published her investigation. Names were technically redacted, but inside the business world everyone knew who the story was about. Daniel Carter had stepped down from the firm. Officially voluntary, unofficially forced. He had disappeared from conferences, from interviews, from public life. Lillian stood beside me looking at the painting. "Is that why you came?" she asked. "To watch me suffer." I looked at her carefully. The bruise was gone, but exhaustion still lived in her eyes. "I did not come for you. I came for me." She nodded slightly, like that truth carried weight. "I started therapy," she said suddenly. 3 times a week. Group sessions too. I acknowledged the words with a small nod. I did not offer praise. "I know I cannot ask you for anything," she continued, "but I wanted you to know I am not hiding anymore." "Except behind every excuse you told me for a year," I replied quietly. "Behind every business dinner, every lie, every moment you said I was imagining things." Her eyes filled with emotion, but the tears never fell. "I never stopped loving you, Vince." For the first time since everything happened, I did not flinch. Instead, a gentle smile appeared. Maybe that was the problem. She opened her mouth, but I continued speaking. "Do you remember that night in Vermont when the power went out? We played cards by candlelight until sunrise." She blinked in surprise. "Of course I remember. You said it was the most peaceful night you had in years." I turned back toward the painting. And I believed you. She whispered softly. It was peaceful. No, I said. It was simply the last night you could lie to me without guilt. Silence surrounded us. Voices echoed softly around the gallery. Glasses clinked. People laughed. But we stood frozen in the moment where our story ended. I am not asking you to come back, she whispered. You could not, I replied. But I am sorry. I know. The problem is that apology cannot open this door again. She nodded slowly. So this is goodbye. I finally looked at her. This is the part where you go your way. And I finally live mine. I left her standing in front of that painting. A man fading into the background. A woman turning away. And for the first time, I was not the man disappearing anymore. A week later, I moved into a small cabin near a quiet lake. No television. Almost no internet. Just tall pine trees and the sound of wind in the evening. I repaired antique chairs 3 days a week for a local shop. Wrote in a journal I never imagined keeping. Made slow coffee every morning. Peaceful. Simple. Months passed. I never heard from Daniel again. The last article I read said he quietly stepped away from the industry. Lillian sent one final message. Thank you for not destroying me. I will carry everything with me. I never replied. Not out of anger, but because there was nothing left to say. Yesterday I stood on a cliff overlooking the lake as the sun set across the water. The surface was so still it looked like glass. And in that quiet moment I finally understood something. She did not break me. She set me free. I had spent years shrinking myself inside that marriage, trying to be smaller, quieter, easier to love. But now, I take up space again. In my life. In my choices. In the mirror. If you ever feel invisible inside your own story, remember this. Sometimes walking away is not losing everything. Sometimes it is the only way to begin again.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Visit our channel for interesting and intriguing stories.